Hello, creative friends. Welcome to this week's episode. If you've been following along, you'll know that we've been talking a lot about the nuts and bolts of pre-production for developing your film. And today we are really digging in on who is actually going to make your film and where are you going to make it?
As Michael Keaton says, filmmaking is the ultimate team sport. So this is where we're talking about the team that you're going to bring together to make your film as good as it possibly can be. There's quite a lot to think about here in pre-production, and there's some other things related to your team. For example, the spaces they need to work in that we'll also touch on in this episode. So where are we going to start?
Well, let's start with where. Where are you going to make your film? And I don't mean on location, like the production part of it. I mean, where's home base? Like, are you going to have an office? Are you going to rent office space? Or is everyone going to work remotely? Or are you going to bring everyone together once in a while for production meetings? So having a think about that dynamic, because as you said, it's a team sport and teams work best when they're in the same place at the same time, crossing over creatively.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, we've got our own headquarters here, and this is where we all get together as a team, and we also have our post-production facilities and some of our production facilities as well. So this is going to be really important, particularly for your editor. They're going to need an edit suite based somewhere. Your collaborators, it might be your composer and your sound designer, they're all going to have their own probably studios that you're going to be able to tap into as well. But you may need to think about hiring a space where this film can be made, and that's going to need to be thought about at this point in pre-production.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, for documentary, because, depending on where you're at in your filmmaking journey, you might be just doing this part-time, or your team might be not full-time on the job with you. So you might just have a desk at a co-working space, and then you might hire a meeting room every so often to bring everyone in together, because maybe everyone is working remotely. But I think my opinion on that is the more you can get people crossing over in person, the better with filmmaking. I think it just is a much more collaborative approach, which results in a better film.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's what I've come to over the years as well. We used to work more remotely than we do today, and we do find that teams work better when they're together. So let's talk about the team members.
Who is this team we're talking about?
I mean, this is going to be a bit of a long list, so check the resources at moonshinecommunicationsacademy.com because you don't need to keep track of all of this, but we'll just go through them. You may be the film producer, so you might
You might be wearing all the hats.
You can't wear them all though. So let's go through some of the key roles that, are normally in a documentary film team. So you've got a producer or producers.
Yep.
You've got, you producers may need a little help, in terms of a production coordinator or a production manager.
Or sometimes called a production secretary.
You may need a director if you're not doing that yourself. So you may need to hire a director for your film. You're going to need a director of photography.
Yep.
Or cinematographer, or a combination of both. You might need some specialist cinematographers depending on the type of work that you're doing. If you've got underwater scenes, you might hire someone who's a specialist in that.
I'm not sure we've ever hired an underwater specialist.
We have. We did 3 years of the World Surfing Tour in Fiji, and we had multiple underwater cameramen, and it was very specialist, wasn't it? Like they needed their own kit. Right. They've got skills that you're not just going to chuck another DOP.
That was a long time ago. I'd forgotten all about that.
But it might be, something to do with another type of, specialist, type of cinematography, like aerial or, whatever.
You got your soundies. You need good sound. This is one thing with documentary. The better you can capture the sound in the first instance, the better it's going to be in the post-production process.
That's true. You might need a gaffer or a grip or a combination of both, depending on what your film is. So the gaffer being the lighting guy, the grip being the one that's putting up more of that infrastructure, rigs, etc., that you're going to need to hang cameras and other equipment off. These could be really important. Like if I remember doing work on cycling, at a higher level, and the grip was so essential to that work because we were rigging things off bikes, we were rigging things off trucks. It's a specialized skill. Often a gaffer is going to be really important if you're doing something that needs to really rely on great lighting. So sometimes members of your team wear multiple hats and sometimes they don't. This is what you need to be thinking about at pre-production stage.
Yeah, and something hair, makeup and wardrobe. Now you might not think in documentary you need very much of this, but if you've got a presenter, which is another role, they probably will need wardrobe at the minimum, and possibly hair and makeup depending on the style of film.
Very common to get that request. You may need a researcher. A researcher might save you a lot of time, so you're not doing all of that heavy lifting yourself.
Yeah, particularly if it's research that involves going into, you know, archives and things that are a little harder to access than just Google.
Yep.
Yeah.
You might need a fixer. Often we've had fixers when we go into certain countries. You know,
I've been a fixer.
You've been a fixer for an international crew here in Australia. You know, it's someone who knows. What's a good fixer have?
Local knowledge is the key to it. Local knowledge, local language, and understanding how to get you the things that you need really quickly because for whatever reason they've come up and you didn't plan for it.
Yeah, on overseas shoots, particularly in Africa, we've had drivers who have been essential team members, you know, in terms of being able to get us around the city in the quickest way possible and the safest way possible as well. Okay, so there are some of the production roles, and you know,
some but not all.
Have a look at the list for everything that you're going to need there. In terms of post-production crew, common ones that you might need are your editor, your picture editor, or editors.
You might need an assistant editor.
Not every editor is going to be able to master the film out for you, so you may need an online editor as well. You
Colour grading.
Might need a specialist in colour, a colourist, a composer, and all of the musicians that they hire, and typically they do the contracting of those musicians. A sound engineer, a sound designer, a sound mixer, maybe the same person.
Might be an audio post house that you hire.
Yep. Animation, which I always recommend goes into the production part. Your
graphic
animation
designer.
house. Yeah, graphic designer. You know, and then there's going to be marketing people that you're potentially going to have on your team as well, in terms of a publicist and marketers who are helping to get your film out there. So, you know, this is the time to be thinking about the ultimate team for your film, because they're not necessarily going to be available when you want them to be. So you're going to need to be a bit adaptable to their schedules if you really want to work with them, or you're going to have to shop around and find other options.
And you mentioned marketing, and I think one of the things that's often overlooked and it's really good to be thinking about in pre-production is audience. Who's going to be the audience for your film? Because they can become the ultimate marketers, and so defining who your audience is going to be is really important, and I would suggest putting a fair bit of time into it in pre-production.
And all of this work is going to help you with your budget, because every one of these different roles is going to have a line in its budget. And there are going to be some things that are a little bit like not top of mind, but super important to your budget. Like your accountant, you're going to need a good production accountant to be looking after the finances, and you're going to need a good production lawyer to look after some of the legal components. And they also need to be in your budget. They're part of your team too.
And it sounds like a lot, but remember, you don't need all of these people full time. You need them at certain points in your production. So it's about knowing who you're going to need, when you're going to need them, and what are they going to need. Are they going to need an office or a location to work from, or do they freelance and work from their own facilities? You just got to know all of these things in advance. They really will inform your budget.
They do, you know, and with your post-production in particular, you're hiring someone's studio, you know, for example, for all of the post-sound work, or are you actually needing to buy equipment for your editors, for example? Do they need computers and hard drives and software? All these types of things are worth thinking about at this point in the process. I think they're essential, actually, to doing your contracting and bringing your team together and making them be able to produce the best work for you possible.
And you're probably thinking that you're going to need an Amazon-sized warehouse to facilitate all of this, but you really don't. You just need to be organised and think it through so that you've got it all available and you've figured out who you need, when you need them, and how you're going to coordinate all of these different people at the various points when you need them.
So that was a lot of information. So if these guys want to find out more or have a checklist or something to reference in terms of some of the key crew roles they might be wanting to think about filling and some of the key line items that we've discussed, where should they go?
Head over to moonshinecommunicationsacademy.com, and I'm sure we'll put it on the bottom of the screen here for you so it's easy to find. There's going to be a resources tab in the top navigation bar. Just click on that and you will find some resources. And if there's anything that you can't find that we've talked about and you're like, I really need that, just DM us or shoot us an email. All of that also is on the moonshinecommunicationsacademy.com site, where you can easily access resources and how to contact us to ask questions.